Scotch Gambit. This is the opening where your king is castled, their king is not, and they're not going to be able to get castled. So it goes like this: you hit the pawn, they guard the pawn, you play d4, and then they take. Now, once you play it like this is the Scotch game. Bishop to c4 is the Scotch Gambit. Now, let me show you how dangerous this is. There's two main moves here. There's knight f6, there's bishop c5. If knight f6, you play e5 and attack the knight. And there's already a lot of ways to lose this. Pawn d5 is the best move. Usually when the knight goes to e4, I like to play c3 because if they take on c3, queen to d5 is completely winning because now we're threatening checkmate and we're attacking the unprotected knight. They play knight g4 thinking they're trying to win the pawn. Just castle your king because if they take the pawn, rook to e1, you pin the knight, and then if they try to protect the knight, you apply pressure to the knight, and this is completely winning. Let's say they play the move bishop to c5. Like anything that is not knight f6, just play pawn to c3. Because now if they decide to take on c3, we're now able to sack the bishop on f7 with check. And then once the king takes, that's a brilliant move, by the way, we play queen to d5, which checks the king, hit the bishop. And, usually the king goes to f8, we take on c5 with check. The king is not able to get castled, you're winning. But if the king goes to e8, I like to play the move queen h5 check, force them to weaken their dark squares, then I take on c5. And then after they take on b2, the bishop just has this massive diagonal. And then once they develop the knight, we could play either e5 to attack the knight or just get the king out the center of the board, and we're winning the game. In this video, you're going to be learning all the opening moves, every middle game plan, nothing about endgames. Your opponent will not survive the endgame. So watch the full video, apply the stuff that I teach, and watch your ratings go through the roof. Picking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys the Scotch Gambit. It's so aggressive and players are just not able to handle it. Now, it starts off like this, it's not necessarily an Italian game. We're going to be playing the move pawn to d4 first. Now, this is us introducing the Scotch game. But then once they take the pawn, if we take the pawn, it's the Scotch game. If we play bishop to c4, this is the Scotch Gambit. And just a disclaimer, if you clicked on this video and it's very short, it's because nobody has been surviving. Like, I'm serious. Now, here's how it works. Whenever they play knight f6, you play pawn to e5. Any other move they play, you play pawn to c3. Because knight f6 hits the pawn, we're going to be playing the move pawn to e5, attacking the knight. The reason why this is so deadly is off the bat, the best move is not to move the knight, and I'm attacking the knight. If they move the knight that I'm attacking, black is losing. So they have to play pawn to d5, which attacks the bishop. Nobody at the lower level is going to find it. So for example, knight to e4, black is losing. Now, what I like to do here is to play the move pawn to c3. And, it's basically easily taking back the pawn on d4. I want you guys to notice that he has an unprotected knight on e4. Now, he's not able to take on c3 because queen to d5 would have actually just threatened mated the knight. So instead, he decides to play the move knight to f6. And usually a move like bishop to d5 is the idea, to just attack the opponent's knight. And when the knight goes back to c5, then we take on d4, hitting the knight again. Another thing that I'm looking on is just queen to e2. But if queen to e2, then he's just going to play pawn to d5. So let's just continue the plan. Bishop to d5. This is a very important move, but it's not good to play bishop to d5 if you're not able to take on d4 next move, because like if I had played bishop d5 here, knight c5, and I don't really have much, but now bishop d5 is very strong. Now bishop to f4 is a very nice move. I mean, he's defending his knight, he's developing his bishop, but now I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. Keep in mind, I'm down by a pawn, but I'm going to be able to develop an attack on my opponent's king, which is in the center of the board. Okay, queen to e7 was played, and I knew you guys did not believe me when I said the position is losing, because we're like 4 moves in the game. But, this makes it even worse for him because, okay, obviously he's trying to castle his king as quickly as possible. But now his queen and his king is on the same line, and his knight is on the same line as his queen and the king. So even if he moves the king, there's still going to be some pinning happening. So first I'm going to start by taking on d6. So that way, the moment my rook goes to e1, the pieces are just going to be getting pinned left and right. I think it's best if you take with the knight, so that way when I play rook e1 to pin the queen, he's able to pull the bishop back to e6. In that scenario, I'd still be better with moves like taking the knight, knight d4, applying pressure to his bishop. But let's see what he plays here. Queen takes. That was Okay, that was not one of the moves. Now, here's how I'm going to be winning this game. Again, the knight and the king is on the same line. Bishops are better than knights, but I am going to be giving up my bishop for a knight. Why? Because once his bishop takes, I'm now able to hit him with rook to e1, which pins the bishop to the king. And again, I am still down by a pawn. But my whole idea is, okay, I think he has to play f5 in order to protect the bishop. He found it. But now my whole idea is to look for ways in which I could apply pressure to his pinned bishop. And how I'm going to do this is playing the move knight to g5. I'm pinning the bishop. It's very important to apply pressure to the pinned piece. He would love to get the luxury of just castling his king, but in this position, he's not able to castle due to this very nice triple fork that would happen on f7. Now, he still has to be careful here. For example, queen f6, I wasn't really expecting. I guess he thinks I'm going to just take on e4, or maybe he wants to castle and you don't want me to play knight f7. But what do we do whenever a piece is pinned? PP on the PP. Very good. Now we play the move pawn to f3, and we're not just applying pressure to the pinned bishop. I mean, my bishop guards the knight. I'm not going to take with the knight. I'm going to take with the pawn. And just like that, 12 moves into the Scotch game. It's over. Okay, he still decided to castle the king, so let's just take the free bishop. If he decides to take, I'm just going to play knight takes, hit the queen. Okay, pawn takes c3. I actually did not even consider what would have happened if he takes on c3. And it's actually dangerous because once he takes on c3, the rook is on the same line as my queen, so my queen has to move. And his queen is also targeting b2. So if I put my queen on any weird square, he takes on b2, and that's a fork. In fact, I think he's able. No, 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 bro. I think you need to take on c3. Once I move the queen, you take, and if I take with the bishop, you take the knight. I would have took with the queen though. Instead, he decides to put his bishop on the same line as my king, which is also, yeah, I think that's also a nice move, but because it's the same idea. Like I'm trying to move my queen away now. If I move my queen away now, he's still gonna take and it's still gonna be a check. If I move my king away, he's still gonna take and it's still gonna be a check. Luckily, while I was talking, I'm able to find to play the move pawn c4. Very nice move. Because yes, I'm still allowing him to do the discovered check and hit my king, but I'm just gonna move the king. Like once I move the king, everything is fine. Everything is safe. And then he decides to play pawn to f4 himself. And okay, the reason why he played pawn to f4 was my bishop was guarding the knight. So f4 is to cut off the communication between my bishop and my knight. Now, I do have a very nice move in this position, and it's a forcing move. You know, like we talk about how to find good moves in chess. How do we come up with the best move? And it all comes down to looking on the checks, the captures, and the threats in the position. And you could also say it was a slightly a drawback mistake because the pawn was guarding g4, pushing it to f4 no longer guards g4. So now I'm able to play the move queen to g4 check. And it's not just the fact that I'm checking the king and I'm guarding my knight. It's the fact that once the king move, my queen covers the e6 square. So now my knight is able to go to e6, which hits the rook and hits the bishop at the same time. So that's not just going to be a fork, which means it's just more material for us. Okay, he played rook to d7 instead, and that's a very nice move because if he had moved the king, knight e6 would have been a fork. Now, if I play knight e6, it's not a fork, but because I'm already ahead by 2 points, I have zero issues in just trading the queens off the board, to be honest. So let's just play the move queen takes f4. I mean, remember, whenever you're ahead by a piece, it's very important that you trade. And then once the queen takes, I'm just going to take back. And then from here, it's just a matter of trading as many pieces off the board to win the game. Like once you're ahead in material, no need to get fancy unless you're 100% sure that the guy's going to be getting mated. Now, pawn to d3 is also a very nice move because, it's a discovered check on my king. And if I block with the bishop, then he takes the queen. And I'm not going to be able to take back due to this check. So I have to move my king. I think I have to just move my king out the way. Pawn to d2. Pawn to d2. Does pawn to d2 works? Okay, here's what I'm seeing. If he plays pawn d2, my queen is under attack. If I take his queen, he takes my rook, and that's mate. If I play pawn d2, oh my god, he played pawn d2. So I have to take. This is what I saw. I have to take, and now my bishop no longer guards the b2 pawn, and his queen is now able to take on b2. The good thing is, though, I'm able to play bishop c3, which is one of the ways how you defend against these threats. I'm not able to play knight c3 because I'll simply lose my bishop, but Okay, this 500 rated player is not playing too bad. Queen takes b2 was played. The guy knows that he should not be trading once he's down in material. But let's play the move bishop c3. Like, who would have found bishop to c3 in this position? I guard my rook, I hit the queen. Queen has to move unless he has some fancy move that I haven't seen. But then once he moves the queen, I should be able to develop my knight and then everything should be fine. Okay, queen to c2. Um, Now here's the issue. I would love to develop my knight, but moving my knight leaves my bishop unprotected, which means I'm not able to move my knight. If I'm not able to move my knight, I'm playing without a rook. So have a little, slight little issue here. But remember what we said. You're ahead in material. Don't be fancy. Just get the queens off the board. So let's just play. Well, there's queen c1. There's also rook c1. Rook c1 hits the queen. There's queen e2 that I don't like. Let's just play queen c1 and get the queens off the board. For 500 though, after he made that mistake in the opening, I was expecting it to just be game over. But guy's playing some chess. Okay, oh my god. I think I blundered because after the queen trade, there's actually bishop to e3. Yo, where are these 500 rated players coming from? So, bro, all you needed to play was bishop to e3 and that would have been a fork. Instead, he decided to get his rook in the game, which is also not bad because he's threatening checkmate on the back rank. Whoa. Okay, what if I just pull the knight back? If I pull the knight back, he checks, I takes, rook takes, and then I pull the bishop back. Or maybe just pull the knight back. So that way I'm able to play knight d2. Now, what I'm about to do is very risky. I'm also thinking of bishop d2. Like, if I'm not careful, I'm lost. I can't move this knight. I can't move this bishop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the knight back. If he checks, I have to take. And then once the rook takes, I block with the knight. Now, once I block with the knight, I'm assuming he's going to play bishop f2, which applies pressure to my pinned knight. And in that scenario, I'm gonna find somewhere to put my knight. Let's say knight a3. And then if he decides to take my knight, I just take and then I have enough pieces guarding. But for 500, guy's playing some chess. Okay. Now he plays bishop to e3. It's a bit too late, bro. Bishop e3. Yeah, bishop e3 is not good anymore. You should have played that from a move before. So now he plays bishop e3. I'm thinking just moving the rook to e1. Yeah, let's just move the rook to e1 actually. And if the rook goes to d1, then I'm able to develop my knight because once the rooks guards each other, I should be fine. Okay, so we were expecting this. Once the rook goes down, we just finally develop the knight, and the rooks are guarding each other through an x3. So yeah, I could now confidently say I'm just completely winning this game. So he took I'm not sure what piece to take with. I'm actually going to take with the bishop so that way I keep his bishop under attack. And that way this pawn is also under attack. And then once he moves the bishop, I should be able to grab this pawn. But from here, it's just a matter of trades. The more pieces that I'm able to trade off the board, the easier it is going to be for me to win. So rook to e3 guards the bishop, counterattacks my knight. Guy's 500, by the way. Let's just play knight c2, save the knight, hit the bishop. So the bishop still has to move. And I'm going to think about either taking this pawn or just rolling my pass pawn up the board. But both of these plans should be able to win the game. Okay, he finally made a move where I could say, he's 500. He puts the bishop on d4, which has been guarded twice, and I'm attacking it 3 times, which means once I take his bishop, I'm just gonna be ahead by a piece. I mean, maybe he takes, maybe he doesn't, but from here it's just winning. And he resigns. But more Scotch Gambit against 600 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600. Let me show you guys some more Scotch Gambit. Hit the pawn, we guard it. Now we play d4, hit the pawn again. And usually it's not best to not take the pawn. For example, pawn d6 prevents their castling right. Now, once they take on d4, we play bishop c4. Now, remember I dropped the video on the Scotch game. This is now the Scotch Gambit with bishop c4. And if you see this video being a short video, it's because everyone that I've been playing are just losing in the opening stage of the game. For example, if knight f6, we play e5, bishop c5, we play c3, or any other move they play, we play c3. And by the way, if you want to play against me, comment your Chesscom username and the ELO, and I'll send you a message. Okay, and this is like the first trap in the Scotch. Like once they take, because of this unprotected bishop, we're now going to be immediately punishing them, and white is winning. Now, keep in mind though, immediate queen d5 will not work, even though you threaten mate and hit the bishop, because queen e7 guards the bishop. And that's why we sacrifice the bishop on f7 first. Now, once the king takes, that's when we hit them with the move queen to d5. Check the king, hit the unprotected bishop, and usually the move is king to f8, and then you just take and then take. If the king decides to go to e8, however, then queen to h5 check is actually a very, very, very important move, because we want them to play g6, and then we take the bishop, and they're going to be so weak on this dark diagonal, then it's going to be bad. So the king went back to e8, and as we said, if you take on c5, it's fine, but queen to, like, just including queen to h5 check makes it hard for them. Okay, if you move, you could move the king again, by the way, and then, okay, I'm just gonna take. But again, we're trying to do what is called provoking a weakness. Okay, king to e7 was played. He did not play g6, so let's take the bishop with check. This time we take it with check. King still has to move. And all right, because I don't have to play queen takes, let's just play knight takes, because I don't have to play queen takes. No, once he plays pawn to d6, I just need to find somewhere for my queen. The position is equal, by the way, from a materialistic standpoint, but from like an evaluative standpoint, I'm kind of making up these words, but from an evaluative standpoint, white is just completely winning. All right, so first and foremost, king safety is important. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. A luxury that I have that he doesn't have, because he's not able to get his king castle. Okay, pawn to d6 hits the queen, and let's go back over to h5 and check the king, because again, we want him to play g6. Please weaken your dark squares and play g6, and then I'm going to hit him with queen h6, and then the bishop comes in, and then he's g6 was played. Now queen h6, and it's going to be madness on the dark squares. Knight back to g8, there's already queen g7. Bishop g5 pins the knight. Knight d5 applies pressure to the pin. Queen g7 hits the rook and apply even more pressure. It's over, man. So bishop to e6 was played. Fair. This is the only piece that I have that has not yet been developed. So let me simply develop my last piece. Even if he plays queen d7, he's still not going to be able to get castled because he already moved his king. Okay, now he plays knight to e5, and obviously we're going to trade because we want to trade. So thanks for helping us trade pieces off the board. And the rook and the pawn is now going to be on the same diagonal. So if I really want a pawn, bishop f6 or queen g7 just wins material. But let's not be too materialistic here. Let's hit him with, let's go rook to d1. Let's bring our rooks in the game here. So now the rook is in the game with tempo, because now the queen has to move. And there's queen g7, which is still an idea, hit the rook, threaten me, depending on what he does with his queen. For example, if he decides to put the bishop in the way, knight d5 is completely winning. If he puts the queen on c8, queen g7 is completely winning. Oh, it's just game over here. It's over here. Okay, queen to c8 was played, and here's what we saw. Takes, check will not work. But because the rook is unprotected and I'm already applying pressure to the knight, I'm going to play queen to g7. Because now I'm threatening checkmate on e7, but I'm also attacking the unprotected rook. And based off what I'm seeing, a move like bishop f7 is the only move that just doesn't get mated. And then I'm just going to take the rook. And that's GG's. So expecting resignation, bishop went all the way back to g8. So he left the rook hanging, but that's just a checkmate. More Scotch Gambit against 700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 700. Let's play some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. So we hit the pawn. Now, once they guard the pawn, we play d4 to hit the pawn again. And once they take, bishop c4, and that's the Scotch Gambit. So he did decide to take the pawn. This is the Scotch Gambit. And as we said, once a knight goes to f6, we play e5. Usually any other move they play, we play c3. So knight f6 immediately hit them with e5. And the correct move is to play d5 in this position. So if persons play this against you, respond with d5. So let's see if black knows what he's doing. Moving the knight is lost, by the way. So d5 was played. So whenever they play d5, you need to play bishop to b5 and pin the knight. Usually the correct move is to play knight e4. And then we play knight takes d4 and apply more pressure to their knight. So knight e4, let's take on d4. The main move is bishop to d4 here. Like, it's actually crazy seeing a 700 797, but still 700 playing some correct theoretical stuff. After bishop d7, by the way, and it's actually pretty cool. You guys could actually know what to do if they do the correct thing very quickly. If the bishop goes to d7, don't take with the knight because pawn takes and you have to move the bishop again. So this is one of those cases where it's best to give up the bishop for the knight. Taking with the bishop is just bad. Like someone give up their bishop for a knight. You take with the pawn with ideas of playing pawn to c5 in the future. Yo, bro thinks why would he do that though? Like I took just take back, bro. That's a knight though. Like that's just a free knight. What did he see? Maybe queen h4 check? I'm just gonna play g3 and you have no more checks. So are you just gonna give me a knight then take the pawn? Tell you, it's Christmas. Okay, then he plays bishop c5 to pin the knight. Why not just take back the bishop, bro? I was giving you so many compliments. You were playing so well. Now I take on d7, and then once he takes back, I'm just ahead by a pawn. Like I understand that it's Christmas, but come on, man. Queen to d7 was played. There's no queen checks. My knight is pinned. That's fine. Let's just play bishop e3, breaking the pin. Eventually, I'm gonna go rook f1, king g1, artificially castle my king, and I'm just safe here. Okay, so he decides to castle his king. Let's just develop, to be honest. Let me just finish my development. I don't think the guy has anything. Like, it looks as if my king is unsafe, but I'm ahead by a piece at the end of the day. My pawn on e5 is the only real weakness that I have. I don't even mind if he wins that pawn. I'm ahead by what, 5 points? Oof, f5. I think he wants to play f4 to hit my bishop. I mean, I could en passant, but no need to do all of that. Pawn to e6 I also like because it hits the queen. But I think it's best if I focus on just ensuring that my rook f1, f4 takes here. Okay, it's rook to f1. If he plays f4, I just take. And if he plays rook to f8, pinning my bishop, then there's just king to g1. And yes, my knight is going to be pinned. There's no way to apply pressure to it. And eventually, I could also move my king to h1. So he plays h6 because now he wants to play g5 followed by f4. But all of that is just too slow. First, I'm going to play e6. Let's just hit the queen, force the queen to move. Like taking on f5 is also just a free pawn, depending on where he puts the queen. So, okay, queen to d6 was played, which means if I take the pawn here and then he takes and then I takes, that could be a fork. So let's just go back to g1, especially since he was also threatening to take on h2. I'm trying to take on f5, hit the queen next. But let's see, there's also knight b5 hits the queen. Maybe knight b5 hits the queen was way more aggressive. But I have to get my king to safety. Okay, bishop takes was played, so I'm removing the guard tactic. He's getting rid of my knight so that way he's able to take this pawn. But what he didn't see was after I take with the queen, not the bishop, because I need to connect my rooks, I am also attacking his pawn on a7. So if he takes on e6, I take on a7. And okay, eventually that king could be getting mated. If he's not mated, I'm happy with my extra piece. So queen takes e6 was played. Let's just take on a7 first. Maybe rook to e1, putting the rook on the same line as the queen is also strong. All right, pawn c6 is interesting, but because if I check, there's king up. But I'm going to play bishop to b6 to hit the rook. Now, if I check, there's no king up. And if the king goes here, I take with check. And if he decides to put the king on d7, that's just going to be a mate. So bishop b6 is a very nice move. Like, what if he puts the king on e8 and I check, king up, check, king has to go here. And okay, that could also lead to mate. He's in trouble now. Okay, pawn to d4 was played. Yeah, he knows that he's gonna lose that rook. Like, what if I still check, then check here? Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like, the rook is dead anyway, so let's check first. And then once the king move, I check again. And then once the king move, that's when I may take the rook. So king had to go there. Let's check. Now the king has to. Ooh, he's gonna put his king on the same line as his queen, which means he's walking right into a pin. Okay, there's also king d6 that I didn't see. But check him here or here. Okay, there got to be some little checkmate and stuff that I'm missing. So here's what we're gonna do. Let's play rook to e1 first. Let's hit the queen first. Let's just hit the queen first. Did I just miss mate in one? Oh my god, hope nobody sees that. I just missed mate in one. Well, he moves queen, which means that's just a checkmate. More Scotch Gambit against 800 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 800. Let me show you guys some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. So knight f3 hits the pawn, knight c6 guards the pawn d4 introducing the Scotch game. But once they take, we don't take back. We hit them with the Scotch Gambit. First surprise. Now, there is knight f6, there is bishop c5, there is bishop to b4. Whenever they play bishop b4, play pawn to c3. You don't want to block, you want to keep the tempo. And then once they take, you take with the pawn, hit the bishop. Now the bishop has to move. Where does he put the bishop? Because putting the bishop on c5 is losing. Putting the bishop on d6 blocks out his bishop. So it has to be bishop to e7 or bishop to a5. Okay, so he did find bishop to a5. And here I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. Like, there's a lot of cases where I'm able to play moves like queen a5 and hit the unprotected bishop. Knight to f6 was played. The moment they play knight f6, I like to just play e5. Like, once there's a knight on f6, just play e5 and just chase that knight away. Because for one, usually the correct move is to know that offense is the best defense and play pawn to d5. But even in this position, if he plays d5, I could take either en passant or take the knight. His king is going to be in the center of the board. White has to be better. But if he moves the knight, then I'm for sure that white is winning. So what is he going to do? Oh, and by the way, if you want to play a game against me, just comment your username and the ratings, and I'll usually send you a message on Chess.com. That's how you get to play. Okay, so he found d5. d5 is one of the correct ways to defend against this. Now, let's say I take on f6 and he takes on c4. If I check his king, he blocks with the bishop. I take on g7, there's rook over. I don't really gain as much that I would want, to be honest. Or take the knight, check, bishop blocks, sack, pawn takes, check. Doesn't work. Bishop to b5. The idea is usually to play bishop b5, knight e4, knight d4. But this is a bit different. So if I take, queen takes, then I check, bishop block, and then queen b3. And then there's just a lot of pressure being applied to the bishop, and bishop a3 is coming, which means his queen and his rook could also be skewered. So let's actually take on d6 and not take the knight, because his king is in the center of the board, and our goal is now to start an attack. I wouldn't be surprised if he castled a king here. Castling the king would be such a good move because he's just like, hey, I'm willing to give back the pawn so that way my king is safe and we play an equal position. But if he decides to take back the pawn, saying, okay, let's I'm ahead by the pawn, let's play it like that, then he's gonna lose. And he decided to play ahead by the pawn. So he took with the pawn. Once the rook goes to, like, anytime you're playing chess, like especially in these Italian type structures, but it doesn't have to be Italian type structure. If you're playing and you're able to play a move like rook e1 checking the guy's king, then he definitely did something bad, because you shouldn't be able to castle then move your rook to check his king and his king is still in the center of the board. So he decides to block with the bishop. We were expecting this, and now it's just a matter of going for the king, like takes, check. If he blocks, then there's queen a4, winning material. Well, maybe it doesn't win material. There's also knight g5 to apply more pressure. And then if he casts like take and then fork, like there's a lot of stuff I could do here. So let's think. Takes, check. If king up, I check. I'm expecting knight block. If knight block, I'm thinking of check. Let's be patient, actually. Let's just be patient. The bishop is pinned. We're already getting back our pawn. So let's apply even more pressure. Now we have 3 attackers. He only has 1 defender. So it's confirmed that we're getting back our pawn. Okay, so he decided to castle his king to safety. So I guess it's time to just win some material here. We have so much attackers on that bishop. Maybe he thinks I'm going to go knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, king over, and he's fine. But I'm actually going to take with the bishop. Because now once he takes, knight takes e6, forks the queen and the rook. And just like that, we've gotten back our material plus interest. But why did he move the king? Why didn't he just take back and just play down the exchange? No, he's already down by a piece and he's about to lose his rook. Like these types of moves, that's just a fork. I have 2 attackers, he has 1 defender. Just take on f7, check. You have to sack your rook, take the rook. You lost the rook anyways. But now I'm ahead by an entire rook. You should have gotten that bishop. Okay, knight e5 hits the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back. I need to finish my development for sure. Okay, queen to d7 was played. Let's just finish our development. Let's go bishop g5. Apply some pressure to the knight, threatening some little tactical stuff. I'm also just trying to trade, to be honest. Like, I'm ahead by a rook. Like, any trade is going to be good for me now. So, rook to f1. Okay, there's no knight jumps that I'm afraid of. I mean, if I move my knight, I am going to be losing the c pawn. But actually, let's take on f6. We're ahead by a piece. Let's just trade. Because the funny thing is, taking with the rook is bad. He has to take with the pawn. Because if he takes with the rook, because my queen is on the same line as his queen, which is what he did, I'm able to take the knight because the pawn is pinned. And what do we know about pinned pieces? They do not protect. So now if he takes, he loses the queen. And I'm threatening his unprotected bishop. Okay, so he didn't take, he pulls the bishop back. There are two pieces attacking f2 though. So let's just pull the rook back to guard f2. Now I have two defenders, he has two attackers, I'm fine. Still need to finish my development so that way I'm able to get all my pieces in the game. Okay, rook to g6 is interesting. I mean, I think he wants to play some queen to g4 or queen to h3 ideas. But here's what I'm noticing. The king is only being, well, g8 is only being guarded by the king. So once I play queen d5, I am threatening checkmate, even without finishing my development. So now he has to find some very creative way to defend his g8 square. But yeah, this is just going to be losing because even if he finds a move, queen to f7 threatens rook to e8. There's not much he could do to prevent all of that. So it's game now. So he saw it. He pulls the queen back. But here was my idea. Queen f7. How is he going to prevent queen to e8, which not only wins his queen, it threatens mate. So he decides to sack the rook. Has just grabbed the rook. I guess he's able to check on g5, but that's all he gets. It's just a check. Like once I put my queen to h1, he's not gonna be able to check my king again. I could also put my king on f1. Like literally just need to move my king. So he checks the king. Let's just move the king. Okay, he actually does have another check on the king. So I need to be careful. With that being said, let's play king to f1. So that way, if he checks the king again, I block the check with the rook. Then he will not have any checks. So at that point, I will be attacking his queen and threatening all sorts of checkmates. He play pawn to h6, so that way, if I check the king runs, but that wasn't the plan because that's just a checkmate. More Scotch Gambit against 900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. We're still going to be playing some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. Hit the pawn. He develops the guard. Now we play pawn to d4. So he took the pawn. Let's go bishop c4. This is the whole idea of the Scotch Gambit. Now, basically, what I like to say is if knight f6 play e5, any other move, just play c3. If bishop e7, if bishop c5, if bishop b4. So bishop c5 was played. You notice he's now developing. We're still going to be playing c3 because the whole idea is if they take on c3, we punish them for having this unprotected bishop by sacrificing on f7. If they don't take, then, which is what he did not take. Now, because he didn't take, I'm gonna take and attack the bishop. And then if he checks, I play knight c3, block the check. And it's crazy because it looks like it's gonna be transposing into some Italian Jacobiana stuff, which I already taught you guys how to play. Oh my lord. The guy, he decided to sacrifice his knight, like some counting issues. Like what, 6 moves into the Scotch? Like if he takes, well, he did take. I just have two defenders. So I'm just gonna take here. And then if the bishop takes, I take. I'm just already ahead by an entire piece. I guess it's Christmas because that was a gift, bro. Okay, and then he decided to just castle the king. I mean, I'm ahead by a piece. Let me just castle my king as well. Now everything is safe. I mean, yes, he's able to take the pawn, but I'm ahead by a piece. Once all my pieces joins the game here, the attack is gonna be brutal. Pawn to d6 was played. Okay, now we develop the bishop, pin the knight to the queen. We don't mind if he plays h6 trying to chase away our bishop because we're not going to, I mean, we're ahead by a piece. We could trade, but it's usually best to pull the bishop back, maintaining this pin that you have on the knight. Pawn to h6 was expected. Let's pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin on the knight. And if pawn to g5, we still pull the bishop back. Okay, he wins a pawn, but his king is going to be exposed. And you know what we do to someone when they expose their king. On to c6 was played. Okay, I think he's already predicting that I wanted to play knight c3, knight d5, and apply pressure to his pin knight. That's why he plays pawn to c3. But I mean, I still need to develop. I still need to guard my pawn. We're not in a rush to win this game. It's already over. Okay, pawn to b5 is interesting. That's, well, it's not interesting. It's just a blunder. It's a drawback blunder because, okay, what was the pawn doing on b7? It was guarding c6. Moving the pawn to b5 no longer guards c6. My bishop is under attack. Don't move the bishop because offense is the best defense. Just take on c6, hit the queen. Now he's forced to move the queen, and I already have two pieces attacking b5, which means I'm also just going to take on b5. The other thing is, moving the queen away will be one less piece defending the knight. And then once I take that knight, his king is going to be all exposed. Okay, queen to d7 was played. My knight is under attack though, so let's just take the free pawn first. My bishop is also on the same line as his queen, so he still has to worry about some nasty discovery ideas that I have, but he also needs to worry about the fact that I'm planning on taking that knight to expose his king. So he decides to move his queen out the way, but this was the initial plan to just get rid of that knight, expose that king. He's also allowing this knight to jump into d5, which will hit the queen and hit the f6 pawn at the same time. Well, maybe he's not going to take, but if he doesn't take, it's also just a free piece. So he did decide to take. Now the knight jump into d5, which hits the queen, attacks f6. Question is, where's he gonna even put the queen? He has to be careful. Queen here is losing the queen to a fork. Okay, the b7 is the only square that doesn't lose the queen. But I'm going for the king, to be honest. Well, the guy played a6. Offense is the best defense, but that's a queen, sir. And I'm attacking Europe. And he resigns. More Scotch Gambit against 1,000 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,000. We're still going to be playing some aggressive Scotch Gambit. Now, after knight c6, now we play d4. And once they take, we don't take back because this is the Scotch game. We play the move bishop c4, and this is the Scotch Gambit. Okay, knight to f6 was played, and here's what we said. If bishop c5, we play c3. If knight f6, just hit them with pawn to e5. Now, the lower rated players are going to think they have to move their knight, and believe it or not, moving the knight is just losing. The correct move is actually to play pawn to d5. So if you're going to be playing the Scotch, then pawn to d5 is what you need to know how to play against. For example, knight to e4, if I'm not wrong, okay, the knight is not trapped. I was thinking of playing bishop to d5, thinking the knight is trapped, but there is knight c5. So let's just go ahead and play pawn c3. And you guys should understand why I'm playing pawn to c3 here. Like anytime there's any unprotected pieces, like maybe on e4 or c5, you play c3. Because if they take, queen d5 threatens mate and hit the knight, which is why he decides to play the move pawn to d6. It's not a bad move, by the way. Now I'm thinking of playing bishop to d5, hit the knight. Because if he moves the knight, we take and then we gain a tempo on the knight. I'm trying to sack, but there's no sacrificial ideas that I'm seeing that will work. So now let's go bishop to d5 and hit the knight. There are different ways in which he could protect the knight, but I'm just going to keep attacking the knight. And once he moves, we take on d4. We also won. Come on, bro. You're 1,000 likes. Guys, please. Like, that's just a knight, though. How are the viewers gonna be learning if you just blunder the knight on the eighth move? You know, it's best if I win the knight, not you blundering the knight. Come on, guys, we want some competitive games. If you're gonna be sending me the challenges, and remember, if you see me playing these 10-minute games, you can send me challenges, but leaving your username and your ratings in the comment section is gonna make your chances way higher of playing. But he decides to take on e5. I'm already attacking the knight once, so let's just play queen to a4, pinning the knight, which means I'm attacking the knight twice. I am assuming, well, come on, bro, you're representing Kenya. Lock in. I attacked the knight twice. The guy didn't even take the time out to think about my last move. The funny thing is, the guy's also playing faster than me. This is GG's. Let's just take on c6 with check, and I'm winning a piece because of the unprotected bishop. So if he takes on c6, I take with check, and that's a fork. If he moves the king, we just move and we're winning. So now we take on c6, and it's completely game over. I'm already ahead by 2 points. I'm about to win 3 more points. So he, bro, you block with the queen, bro. That's a rook. That's a drawback mistake. Come on, man. The Kenyans. Where are the Kenyans in the chat? We need to have a talk with this guy. It's now just game over. Now he blocks with the queen. And he knows that he shouldn't be trading once he's down in material because he watches my video. We're not even going to trade the queen. We're going back to c6, hitting the exposed king and hitting the bishop on c5. So now we're winning more material. We're at +7. We're about to win an entire bishop. Now we're up +10. And I haven't even finished my development and castle my king. Okay, he plays e5. That's a free pawn, by the way. But let's just get the king out the center of the board. And now I'm planning on taking on e5. Maybe rook e1 to take the pawn. And he decides to resign. But more Scotch Gambit against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100. Let's play some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. Develop the knight, hit the pawn. He guards it. We hit the pawn again. And once they take, this is the Scotch Gambit. We play bishop to c4. If knight f6, we play e5. If bishop c5, we play c3. If anything they play that is not knight f6, we play c3. So bishop is on c5. Now we play pawn to c3. And bishop c5 is going to be one of those moves that you see a lot. And the 1100 player is already falling for this tactic. I mean, you guys should know what the move is. You saw it in the intro. Everybody's blundering like this. The bishop is unprotected. And it's not just the Scotch game. It's like a lot of Italian types of position. I already told you guys, immediate queen d5 will not work. So we sacrifice the bishop on f7. And then once the king takes, we hit them with queen to d5, attacking the exposed king and hitting the unprotected bishop. So once the king takes, we play the move queen to d5 check. And it's usually best for them to play king f8 because if they put the king back on e8, I like to throw in a check queen h5 first. And again, it's fine if they play king to f8 or king e7. But g6 would be a huge mistake for them because it weakens this diagonal. So king e8, let's throw in this check on h5. And then once they play g6, that's when we take the bishop. If not, then we just play queen takes c5 and then finish our development. So g6 was played very good. Queen takes c5. This is gonna be bad for black, especially if he takes on b2. If he takes on b2, it's over because after this diagonal, maybe he has to play knight f6, but it's just gonna be over. Whoa! Pawn takes b2 was played. Bishop takes b2 hits the rook. I think he has to play knight f6 now. How far in my preparation did I go? What do we do whenever they play knight to f6 again? The knight is pinned, so I'm thinking queen to g5, which hits the knight, but there is rook to f8. I'm also thinking e5, which hits the knight, and then once the knight moves, we play e6 to hit the rook. But then he's just gonna move the rook. To be honest, like what do I get? Honestly, okay, I think I see something. Pawn e5 hits the knight. Let's say knight e4. If knight e4, there's queen c4. I'm trying to find a way to trap the knight. For example, queen e3, and the knight is trapped. And if e5 knight to g4, pawn h3, and the knight is trapped. So the move is in fact pawn to e5. Now, pawn to d6 would be a nice move for him because now I'm not able to take the knight because I lose my queen. In that case, most likely I'm gonna take and then castle, or I'm gonna play maybe queen to c4. But I don't have to worry about trying to keep his king in the center anymore because he's not able to get castled. This is what we looked on, by the way. Knight goes to e4, queen goes to e3. The knight is not able to go back any square. The knight is not able to go forward. The only move that he could play which defends the knight is pawn to d5. If he does play pawn to d5, I am passant, which is a discovered attack on the rook, and it also pins the knight. And that's why he decided to sacrifice his knight. So, yeah, let's just take the knight. I could have also taken with the queen, but I just wanted to keep my queen active. I'm ahead by an entire piece, and his king is also not able to do anything. So I was about to say rook to f8 is the only thing that he could try, but everything is just fine. There's no way to apply additional pressure. So let me just finish my development here. Let's just go knight d2, maybe rook to e1, king to g1, and here we just wait. Trade the pieces off the board, win the game. Pawn to g5 is interesting. The guy's trying to put pressure on my pin knight. That's not bad. Let's play pawn to h3 to prevent that. And then if he plays h4, I may play queen e4 with some ideas of playing queen g6 because moving this pawn will in fact leave this square unprotected. I think he's going to play it because, he's really trying to win my knight. So he did play that move. Now I play queen e4. And funny enough, queen e4 protects the g4 square twice. So he's also not able to play g4. But I'm actually secretly trying to play queen to g6. Like once I check his king, if he blocks, then, I'm fine. If he moves the king, though, then he's going to be getting mated. pawn d6 cannot be good, bro, because it's not even a trade. Like, once I take, your king is gonna be in check. So once I take, if he blocks with the bishop, we take. If he blocks with the knight, we take. So I'm thinking about taking, forcing the king to move. Am I seeing any checkmate? No. I'm also thinking about check, and if the rook blocks, I push. Check. If the king goes here, I push. And then once the king goes here, for some reason, I think queen g6 is still better, even though I'm able to check and force the king to move. Let's go queen to g6. I think my chances of checkmating his king right now is depending on queen g6, because I'm also thinking about ways to get my rook in the game to join the attack. So, for example, king e7, I could take with check, then swing the rook in the game with check. King e7, yeah, I think that's the move of king e7. So he did play the move rook to f7, and because the rook is pinned, as we said before, pawn to e6, pp on the pp. Bishop takes e6. There's queen takes e6 with check. I'm threatening mate here. Maybe he's going to play queen e7 actually. And then at that point, I take the rook and then swing the rook in the game. This is one of those cases where I'm ahead in material and I still don't want to trade the queens off the board, because look on the guy's king, look on my king. My king is safe. Like, I'm going to be checkmating his king here. But you should only be playing like this if you know that you have a checkmating attack on the king. Okay, he sacked the bishop. Let's just take with the queen. Now I'm ahead by 3 points. He decides to block with the queen. And okay, like, his king is still not able to get castled. So I will still not trade the queen. I'll play queen g6 to ensure that I'm pinning this rook. And then now my plan is to play rook to e1, so that way I'm able to pin his queen to his king. Okay, queen went back to f8, maybe applying some pressure here. I think he just wants to step off what's happening here, though. Very interesting idea. Okay, let's just get the rook in. I was planning on playing bishop f6 to preventing his king from running. I think he's going to be running anyway, so let's just get the rook in the game with check. So he decides to play king to d8. My knight is pinned, so I'm not able to take. So let's just take on g5 with check, just forcing his king to continue running over. And I think in order to win this game, I need to bring more pieces in the attack. So I'm going to play something like rook to e6 or rook to e4, just lifting the rook with ideas of swinging over this rook in the game, because I want to play this move rook to e8 and win his queen. Okay, king to d7 was played, which is also not bad. From here, I'm going to play knight c4. Now I'm trying to also get my knight in the game. There's also rook to d1 that I'm thinking of, with some knight e5 ideas, because his king is in the center. So there's a lot of ideas with that. I think he's going to swing the a rook over in the game, though, because, that rook isn't really doing much. But let's see. Okay, so he got his rook in the game. Let's just take the rook. Like, we're ahead in material and we're ahead by 4 points. So even if we're not able to deliver the checkmate right here, I mean, we should still be winning. I mean, let's put the rook in the game and even trade. Like, I should be fine with even trading here. So queen moves to f8. He's not defending too badly. Let's play king g1, just getting off my king off this file so that way I'm free to move my knight. I'd love to check here, by the way, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work. So, okay, he blundered his rook. He played rook to b7. He puts his rook right on the same diagonal as my bishop. Let's just take that rook. And again, taking with the queen is also completely won. I just think I'm able to checkmate his king right here. Okay, queen to f7 was played, which is attacking my knight. Well, he resigns. More Scotch Gambit against 1200 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1200. Let's play some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. Knight c6, we play d4. This is the opening that nobody is able to deal with it. Now, once they take, we don't play the Scotch game. We play bishop c4 and we play the Scotch Gambit. Knight goes to f6, hit them with e5. Bishop goes to c5, hit them with c3. If they play any weird move to waste time, still hit them with c3. Because now I'm immediately threatening to take on d4 and just get a big center. And that's going to give me an advantage. But if he had taken, then he would have been in a losing position. So he decides to play the move pawn to d6. And then after pawn to d6, we take on d4, hit the bishop. Now we have a big center. Now, bishop to b4 check is the right way to deal with this, because it's very important that you keep the tempo. But now I'm just going to play the move knight c3. I'm developing my knight. I'm blocking the check. Like, this is fine. This is the development that you need when you're playing. Okay, now he decides to play the move Knight to f6, hit the pawn. Now, there's actually some very, very nice ideas here. So there's actually pawn to d5, which is it's a very nice trick. And this opponent being 1200, I'm 100% sure that he's gonna fall for it. Now, here's what a move like just castling the king or just bishop g5 is a good way to respond. But if you play a move like pawn to d5 here and attack their knight, you notice how quickly he moves the knight? 9.5 times out of 10. If you attack someone's knight, they're going to move the knight. But this is already losing. It moves into the Scotch because the bishop is unprotected and the king is exposed. What do we do when there's more than one weaknesses in the position? That's how we punish them for it. Queen to a4 check, and this is called a fork. We hit the bishop and the king at the same time. It doesn't matter how he blocks the check, we're just going to take the bishop. I mean, maybe he blocks with the knight and we take the knight, but any other way how he blocks the check, we take the bishop, we win the game. So he decides to block with the bishop. Let's just play queen takes b4. We're already ahead by an entire piece. So from here, it's just a matter of trade. So a5 hits the queen. We still have to be careful, by the way, because we have to ensure that once we move the queen, we keep the bishop guarded. That's very important because he wants to win back his bishop. So I'm assuming he's going to play a4 and hit the queen again, thinking, okay, now I have to move away my queen and then he's going to take the bishop. But if he plays a4, the queen goes back to b4 and the bishop remains guarded. b5 is a very interesting way to play, but it does not work. Like, I think once I take, he wants to play rook to b8 and pin my bishop, but I'm just going to take his bishop. And this is called an in-between move, by the way. There's also just knight takes e5 first, which is just trading because, I mean, once you're winning, you should trade the pieces off the board. And I'm leaning towards knight takes e5 because I don't want him to take and double up my pawns. I'm trying to get castled. So let's just take on e5. And if he decides to take my bishop, we use the same knight to take back on c4. So we're actually winning a pawn in this process. So he took, let's take on c4. Now we're ahead by 4 points. Our king is going to be castled to safety. We're going to finish our development. Life is good. So rook to b8 hits the queen. I'm just going to pull the queen back in and keeping e4 guarded a bit more. My knight on c4 is unprotected. There's nothing that is able to attack it right now. So the plan is just to castle and finish development. So he castled his king. Now, before I castle, I'm going to play bishop to g5 and pin his knight to his queen because this is just going to be so annoying. If he plays h6, I pull back and we maintain the pin. I mean, because I'm ahead by a piece, if I take on f6, it's perfectly fine because, you know, bishops are better than knights. So that's why I'm not trying to take on f6. I'm actually going to pull back and maintain. But if you're ahead by a piece, you know, knock yourself out and give up the bishop. So he plays g5. Let's just pull the bishop back. That's what we wanted, by the way. We wanted him to expose his king. Rook to b. Why is this guy so aggressive all of a sudden? He just wants to win back his piece. So my knight is now under attack. Let's just pull the knight to e3. Everything is guarded now. So I'm not assuming he's going to make another aggressive move. We're going to castle our king and just win this easily. Yeah. Yeah, he's playing very aggressive. Like I was about to castle, but the guy just wants back his piece. Okay, he's starting to play h4 and trap my bishop. One of the best ways to respond to this is just to play h5, because then if they take, we take back and we're fine. And if they push you, we basically deal with the threat. And I'm also going to be able to get castled. He's the one who's weakening his king. You know, he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on. So g4 was played. Now we get the king out the center of the board. And I'm going to be punishing him for doing all of these pawn moves on the side that his king is on. You shouldn't be doing that. Okay, rook to e8. There's now one, two, three pieces attacking e4. I only have two pieces guarding e4. How do I even add an additional defender? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to add an additional defender because offense is the best defense. So I'm actually going to play a3 with the idea of chasing away his rook. So if I'm able to chase away his rook, then I'm going to be left with two defenders versus two attackers, and that's fine. Rook to d4, however, would be a very interesting way to play. But because I'm ahead in my T-roll, rook to d1 just trades the rooks off the board and I'm fine. So he decides to pull the rook back, which means we're not afraid of anything that is happening here now. Now it's just a matter of improving our position, you know, like pieces that are not doing anything, get those pieces in the game. Let's start with bishop to f4. Like, I'm trying to improve my bishop. Maybe I needed to put both of the rooks towards the center of the board first. But if he allows me to pin his knight, then it's gonna be game over. So I'm assuming he's gonna pull his knight back. Once the knight moves, though, my pawn on h4 is gonna be under attack. He didn't even try to do none of that. In fact, he decides to play pawn to c6, which is actually a drawback mistake because the pawn being on c7 was guarding the pawn on d6. Moving the pawn to c6 no longer guards the pawn on d6. So now we're able to take on d6. The initial plan was to actually pin the knight, though. Maybe if I had still pinned the knight, it would be better, but pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. Okay, so he moves the rook. I'm trying to go back for the same idea. So bishop f4, and then if he takes, we pin. And then if he takes again, we take. Yeah, let's do that. Let's pull the bishop back. Because as I said, if he allows me to pin, it's game over. Even though it's already game over, we're already ahead by 5 points. He take, now we pin. We're not afraid of this fork, by the way, because the whole idea is PP on the PP. If he allows that, it's over. And I'm not seeing how he's going to be preventing it. Okay, he went for the fork. This guy's very aggressive, by the way. It doesn't really matter which knight I use, to be honest. Let's just jump in with d5. This is just PP on the PP. The knight is pinned. We have to put pressure on it. And once he takes, we're just going to take on f6. This should lead to at least a checkmate or him losing his rook. But I'm going to be going for the checkmate. Okay, rook to e6 was played. Now look on this. He has two defenders. I have two attackers, right? I mean, if we take on f6 with check and he decides to take with his rook, he's voluntarily deciding to lose his rook and he's voluntarily putting his rook into a pin. What do we do when a piece is pinned? Especially, I've seen persons whenever they pin a rook to a queen or pin a rook to a king, they immediately take the rook. But that's not how you should be doing it. You should PP on the PP. It doesn't matter. Taking the rook gives us material, but once we PP on the PP here, we get the entire 5 points. Okay, that was a nice move. That was definitely a nice move. We're still going to be getting the entire 5 points, but it forces the queens off the board. So that was a nice move. Now, if I take his queen, he takes my queen, and it's just a trade. So we're going to be doing something called an in-between move, sacrificing the queen, knowing his queen is hanging. I think it's also called an intermezzo. So now that he takes my queen, I take his queen. Now, we're just ahead by 9 points here, so it's just completely game over. The opponent resides. More Scotch Gambit against 1300 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1300. Let's play some more aggressive Scotch Gambit. Let's hits the pawn again, and if he takes, we go bishop d4. That's the whole idea. Usually there's sometimes when they don't take, but it's actually bad to not take, to be honest. Once they take on d4, now we go bishop to c4. This is the Scotch Gambit, by the way. Nobody is able to handle it, which is crazy. It's one of those lines where if you don't know exactly what to do against it, then you're going to be in trouble. So knight f6, we play e5. Anything else, we play c3. It's also very easy to play. So bishop to c5 was played. Now we play c3. And if they take on c3, it's losing because we're able to sack on f7, play queen d5, pick up the bishop. Usually if they play knight f6, we take on d4 and it transposes into some aggressive Italian type of stuff, which I also taught you guys. So pawn d6 is one of the solid ways to play. Like, okay, let me get the bishop outside of the pawn chain, then play d6. But let's just take on d4, hits the bishop. Usually it's best to check, and then I'm gonna play the move knight c3. And there's actually a trap here that I've seen a lot of persons fall for it, and I'm gonna see if he's gonna fall for it. So bishop to b4, let's play knight c3, and then after knight to f6 hits the pawn, I just play immediate pawn to d5. And if so knight f6, we immediately play pawn to d5, and if he tries to move this knight, he immediately loses his bishop on b4. So it's actually best for him to take on c3 first, giving up the bishop, then move the knight. But I'm fine with the bishop here. So he did play knight e5. Another person fell for this. So okay, I don't think we're able to take, because if we take on e5, he's going to take on c3 first. So now we play queen to a4. 8 moves into the Scotch Gambit, and again, we are winning material. So he blocks with the bishop. Let's just take on b4, hit the pawn. We're ahead by a piece, by the way. So it should be smooth sailing for us from here. Like, accept all the trades, get the king out the center of the board. Easy win. Okay, so he checks. We have to take back, doubling up the pawn. So maybe a bit uncomfortable for us to castle, but our king is actually very safe in the center because he doesn't really have any ways to break open the center with pawn breaks, and the piece sacrifices are not going to work. But because we're ahead in material, we're just trying to trade. So let's just play bishop to g5, spin the knight to the. Okay, maybe I should have played rook to g1 first. Definitely should have played rook to g1 first. But anyways, pawn to h6. Let's just. Mm, I should have played rook g1 first. Now I have to pull back because if I takes queen takes, f3 is under attack and I have to defend. If I had played rook g1 and then he castled, then bishop g5 would have been so strong. Okay, pawn a5 hits the queen. Let's just pull the queen back. That's fine. Okay, he castles the king. And this was actually the whole point of what I wanted. Playing rook to g1 and it transposes because now if he plays g5 I'm able to play f4 and apply pressure to g5. He moves his king off the same line as my rook, which makes a lot of sense, by the way. From here I'm just trying to trade though, so let's go bishop to b5. My light squared bishop is also not really good, so once I go bishop to b5, I think it's best, well, I want to trade, he shouldn't trade, so it's best for him not to trade, so he played bishop to h3. But now I'm able to play rook to g3, bro. And the bishop is not trapped, but he has to pull it all the way back. Now, I need to be careful of him playing pawn to g5, but I'm more than likely I'm going to just take on f6. If he pulls the bishop all the way back to c8, I'm just going to take on f6. I want to trade anyways. So the bishop went all the way back to c8, and so the move that I'm scared of is g5. And after looking on the position for a bit longer, I'm actually able to play f4. So again, if you're ahead by a piece, just trade. It's easy. But this spin is very annoying. And I could actually win the game because of this spin. For example, castle swing over the other rook. Let's see what he does though. Queen e7. He's still not able to. Let me get my king out the center first because he's putting his queen on the same line as my king. E5 becomes, look on what I'm seeing. Pawn e5 if he takes, pawn d6 if he takes, knight d5, apply pressure to the pinned knight. And then once the queen move, we take and we expose the king. So bishop to b7 just prevented everything that I just spoke of. But e5 takes, queen takes. All right, let's play queen c4. The plan is to play queen d4 and apply more pressure to the knight. If queen d4 takes and we trade, then at least he's going to have like some ugly double pawns. And my bishop on b5 is playing a very good role, preventing his rook from joining the game. Rook to c8, okay. All right, here's what we're going to do. Before I play queen d4, let's play rook g1. That's two pieces attacking g7 and he only has one. So I would not be surprised if he just puts the rook back on g8 here. Okay, he puts the rook back on g8. Now we play queen to d4, and we're just applying so much pressure to this pinned knight. It's crazy. Like, notice how the pawn on g7 guards the knight? My plan is actually to take on g7, removing the guard. And if he plays rook takes, I take on f6, which hits the queen, pins the rook, force the queen to move. We grab the rook, and he's going to be getting mated. Crazy. Okay, so he decides to just play immediate g5. But the thing is, his knight is still pinned. So once I take, this is actually me applying pressure to the pinned knight. And if he takes, I still take and apply pressure to the pinned knight. So I'm assuming he's trying to sacrifice his rook, which I'm okay with because the knight is basically dead. And if he sacked the rook, I'm just going to take, okay, rook to g6. Rook to g6, I didn't see. Okay, we're winning though, but let's say I takes rook. Okay, if I takes, there's also queen takes. Check, king up. Okay, that's not bad. E5, there's pawn takes. Check, king move. Check, queen takes. Check. I mean, I just need to trade the pieces off the board, though. I don't know why I'm trying to be fancy and slick. And the funny thing is, taking the knight could actually lead to a checkmate because it is actually checkmate. What am I saying? Take the knight. If the rook takes, because I have both of the rooks cutting off the king, rook h3 is just going to lead to mate. Same thing if he takes with the queen. The funny thing is, it's just mating one because the rook is also pinned. That's just a checkmate. But more Scotch Gambit against 1,400 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,400. Let's play some more Scotch Gambit. So knight f3 hits the pawn. Knight c6 guarded. Now we play d4. Very unusual username. But now we play d4. And then once he takes, we play bishop to c4. This is the Scotch Gambit, not the Scotch game where we take on d4. So here's the idea. If they play knight f6, we play e5. If they play bishop c5, we play c3. Pawn to d6 was played. Okay, pawn to d6 is like a very solid way to play. I'm not gonna lie, but he is blocking out his bishop. And don't try to win quickly with knight to g5, threatening f7, because if you go knight g5, there's just knight e5. So what I like to do when they play d6, I still like to play pawn to c3. Like taking on d4 is perfectly fine, by the way. But because I'm trying to play the Scotch Gambit and he plays pawn to d6 and block out his dark squared bishop, this is going to be good for me. Now, I am going to take back with the knight, but keep in mind, I could also castle my king here. And if he takes, I play bishop takes, and it transposes into a Danish gambit. But let's just take on c3. I now have a very nice lead in development. The opponent decided to play the move bishop to h5. And there's actually a little trick here. There's definitely a little trick here. Like, for example, if I play knight e5 and he takes my queen, I could take on f7 and then mate. If I play h3 and then he goes back and I play knight e5, taking the queen also leads to mate. But it's not the right idea because the pawn is not on e5. Now, he's also threatening some ideas of playing knight e5. Now, a very nice way how I like to deal with these types of pins is to just immediately break the pin, move the queen to b3, and we're immediately targeting f7 and b7 at the same time. So now if he takes on f3, we just take on f7 first with check, and then his king is going to be getting mated. Otherwise, I'm assuming he's going to put something on d7 or e7, trying to guard f7. There's also bishop f5. Okay, knight to a5 was played, and it's very interesting because, okay, first, I'm definitely going to be taking on f7. The guy didn't decide to protect f7. The funny thing is, though, once he moves his king, queen e6 is not going to be a mate because his bishop covers the light squares. But here's the thing. His knight is unprotected, and this is actually a very good way for you guys to deal with this. So if you put your queen on b3 and you're immediately forked, still take on f7 with check. Because regardless of where the king moves, you should be able to simply just move your queen to a not random square, but just move your queen and attack his knight. So if you lose your bishop, he loses his knight. But the thing is, can I get more? For example, bishop g5 check, bring more pieces in the game. Knight f6, we go knight d5 check, but then there's king takes f7, and if I try to move my knight, he's just going to take my queen. Queen e6 is still not a checkmate. I really hope I'm not missing anything. With that being said, let's just play queen to a4 here. Yes, we're leaving our bishop unprotected, but we're also attacking his knight. And again, the guy's king is not able to get castled. You guys should know this. If you're able to just win back the pawn once you sacrifice it, then you should just be winning. So once the king takes, we're just going to be... There's also knight g5 check, which I like. There's just a lot of stuff that I like here. He did decide to take on f7. Now, if I take the knight, maybe he could take my knight and argue that he gave me double pawn. So I'm thinking of knight g5 check first. Knight g5, he moves the king to, let's say, okay, knight g5 is very interesting. I'm going to play it because he's not able to move the king to e8 because my queen guards that square. So he has to put his king on some uncomfortable squares like g6. Nobody wants their king on g6. He moves the king. My fellow viewers, we are 10 moves into the Scotch Gambit, and that's just checkmate. More Scotch Gambit against 1,500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,500. Let's get very aggressive with some Scotch Gambit. So knight c6, we play d4. And you guys already know that taking the pawn is the Scotch game. But bishop c4 is the Scotch Gambit. And this is the one that, persons just find it so hard to play against this. Pawn to a6 is one of those moves where they are afraid of the knight going to g5, and putting the knight on g5 wasn't even my intentions, to be honest. So he's basically just helping me to now get my king out the center of the board. He hasn't started a way to try to get his king out the center. Now he plays knight f6, and he could have just played knight f6 because if knight g5, there's knight e5. Whenever the knight goes to f6, play e5, hit the knight. Whenever the bishop goes to c5, play c3. That's the whole idea. Now, I'm imagining in that he could play d5 to hit my bishop, and then if I take his knight, he take my bishop. But he already gave me a free tempo because his h6 move I managed to castle, and that's why he puts his knight on g4, which is Here's the funny thing though. I'm not gonna play h3 as yet, you know. There's two attackers on my pawn, so I need to play rook to e1 to add more defenders. But if he allows me to play h3, the knight has nowhere to go. So he kind of has to play h5, you know, going for some fishing pole ideas. This could be already lost. So the bishop decides to go to e7, and my fellow viewers, 7 moves into the Scotch Gambit. And after we play pawn to h3, the 1500 opponent is already down by a piece. So he decides to take on e5. You know, we already have two defenders. So, you know, I'm just winning here. Once the knight takes, I take back. We're ahead by a piece. So he decided not to take and castle his king instead. Now, I'm still having some ideas. For example, instead of taking the knight, why not take the bishop? Like, can't I play knight g6 utilizing this pin, forcing the rook to move? Then we take the bishop? Because if I take the knight, he plays d takes and I'm helping him to develop his light squared bishop. Or I could just develop another piece, to be honest. I think it's more important for me to develop. That's the thing. I need to just develop. So let's just play bishop to f4 here. Like knight g6 followed by take. It's a nice move. It's attractive because he's not able to take. And I'm ahead by a piece. You know, no need to do too many weird stuff. Like knight d2 to f3, maybe queen d2. Just get all the pieces in the game. Okay. But then Mr. 1500 decided to play rook to e8, which concludes the game. We're 10 moves into the opening. He left his f pawn unprotected, which means, first of all, if we take with the bishop, we win the rook. But we're not going to be taking with the bishop because if we take with the knight, the queen is trapped. Queen literally has nowhere to go, which means we're just going to take the free queen on the next move. And the opponent resigns. More Scotch Gambit against 1600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600. Let's play some more very aggressive Scotch Gambit, pawn to d4. And once they take, we play bishop to c4. So let's see what's going to come. Pawn to d6. This is one of those solid ways to play where you're like, okay, if you play pawn to d6, you don't lose coming out of the opening, but you are blocking in your dark squared bishop. So I still like to play pawn c3. And if they take, I take. And I'm just going to be like, hey, I have a lead in development, plus you have a bad bishop. I'm chilling here. I have seen persons play bishop to g4, pinning my knight. If they go bishop to g4, we just play queen b3. Knight to f6, knight g5 runs into knight e5. So knight g5 doesn't work. Sacking doesn't work because we do not have enough pieces. Immediate queen to b3 is interesting, but it's very easy to defend against something like that. So the best I could do here is just get my king out the center of the board. And if he puts the bishop on g4, then we could think about playing queen to b3. Immediate bishop to e6 is interesting. And one thing I could tell you guys is whenever they put their bishop on e6, just take it because now, once we take it, here's what we're now seeing. Moving the bishop from c8 left b7 unprotected, but e6 is also unprotected. So it's easier for us to play moves like queen b3 to target both b7 and d6 at the same time. Now, if I do play queen to b3, there is queen to c8. So what if I play knight g5 first? Knight g5 first, and if queen d7, then queen b3, and then I'm attacking this, and then I'm going to win this. So I think that's an idea. Queen b3, queen c8, there's also knight g5. So wait, knight g5, queen d7, queen b3, knight d4. But then I'm going to be able to take. So I think it's best to play knight g5 first. And one thing I want you guys to notice I'm doing, I'm actually starting my attack. Hopefully you know that I'm starting my attack with my bishop undeveloped. My rook's not really doing much. But that's because he already played moves like pawn d6, plus I have a lead in development, plus his king is in the center, plus he has weaknesses. So I'm kind of permitted to like break these principles. It doesn't mean I'm going to play the entire game and just forget about my other pieces. I'm going to try to attack and try to get these pieces in the game at the same time. So he decides to play the move pawn to e5, and now the whole idea hits where, okay, let's think. There is queen b3, which threatens the pawn and threaten mate. There is knight to e6. Knight to e6 is usually very nice. Queen b3, queen d7, take on b7, rook b8, queen has to move, and okay, we got back the pawn. But knight e6 hits the queen. Usually the queen goes to d7 or e7, and at that point we just ignore the threat on the knight and play knight d5. Because if the queen ever takes our knight, we play knight c7, and that's a royal fork. And if the knight takes the knight, we simply take it the knight, and we have the strongest knight on e6. So This is also a very important thing that I want you guys to know. Like, know this idea because I think whenever the queen goes to e7 to attack my knight, knight to d5 is also a brilliant move. So know this idea. So queen goes to e7 to hit the knight. We do not move the knight. We play knight to d5, and I'm sure this is a brilliant move because the queen is not able to take my knight due to the fork. And if he takes, I take hit the knight, and I have a very strong knight. How long? Well, this 1600 rated player decided to, yo, why is no one? And he resigns. Opponent is now 1700. Let's play some more very aggressive Scotch Gambit. Knight c6, we play d4. And then once they take, this is not the Scotch game. This is the Scotch Gambit. So the bishop goes to c4. And let's see how our 1700 opponent's going to deal with this. Bishop to b4 check. Now, this is also one way to do it. Whenever they play bishop to b4, it's very important that we maintain the tempo in the position. So it's very easy to try to block with a piece, but it gives the opponent the tempo. So we're actually going to play the move pawn to c3 still. So if you're a Scotch player, this pawn c3 moves becomes important. And again, I could castle my king and then let him take and then get this massive lead in development. But that's the Danish gambit. So once he takes, we're actually going to be taking back with the pawn. And yes, it seems weird because why not develop our knight? We want the tempo. Now we force his bishop to move again. And remember, a bishop being on c5, we're just going to sack, which is why he decides to put his bishop on the d6 square. But putting the bishop on d6 blocks out his light squared bishop. How is he going to be developing his light squared bishop now? So let's just use the time to get my king out the center of the board. I believe it's not going to be too hard for him to get his king out the center of the board because he's not allowing me to play e5. But now that my king is castled, I'm really thinking about playing e5. Like, if he plays knight f6, I'm more than likely going to still play e5 and we're going to be winning a piece. So we know that they can't manage the Scotch already. This is probably going to be a very short video. Knight f6 and it's over. 7 moves into the Scotch Gambit and we're already winning a piece. Okay, the king is in the center of the board. This is only going to work because the king is in the center of the board, but pawn to e5 is just winning. It looks like a fork. It is a fork. And if you do the count, it's like the math is not mathing because he has 2 pieces on the square and I only have my knight. We don't care because once we play e5 and he takes with the knight, we take back with the knight. If he takes with the bishop, we pin the bishop. And if he protects the bishop in any way, PP on the PP. Same thing with the knight. Hit him with pawn to e5 and the game is already over. So he decides to play knight takes. Let's just grab the knight. And then the moment the bishop goes on the e file, we pin the bishop, we win the bishop. So the bishop on the king is on the same line. Rook to e1, bringing more pieces in the game. Pawn to d6 protects the bishop. But what do we do here? PP on the PP. So maybe he's gonna castle or do something, but it's just game over. I mean, it's GG's. So he decides to just castle his king, and we're just gonna take the bishop. We're already ahead by a piece. So from here, our plan is to finish our development as quickly as possible. So I'm trying to think if I take the queen and then take the pawn, it's gonna win a pawn, but it doesn't. So I think it's so important that I finish my development here. Maybe even bishop a3. Bishop a3, and then he trades the queen, and then he plays rook to d8. At that point, I'm thinking bishop e7. Let's just go bishop g5. Mm-mm. Bishop g5, he trades the queens, and then he moves the knight to hit our bishop. So here's what we're doing. We play queen to b3 and target the f7 pawn. We keep the queens on the board, knowing that e5 is under attack, knowing that there's no good way to defend e5, knowing that we're threatening to play bishop a3 and hit the rook. And if you guys do some math, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He has 7 pawns. We have 4 pawns. So technically, okay, you could say I'm ahead by a piece, but the guy has 3 pawns for the piece. So it's not like he's dead lost. The thing is, though, I intended to sacrifice the pawn in order to gain the lead in development. And gaining the lead in development got me the piece. So white is just winning here. And how easy it is going to be to get back my pawns. Like, I'm already seeing 2 pawns. That is mine. And then, I'm negotiating with the f7 pawn. But this is GG's. Okay, so he decides to pull the knight back to d7, and this is not a terrible way to defend. I think I see his idea. So for one, he's basically saying, okay, e5 is guarded. And once I play this move, bishop a3, which I'm still going to play it because it allows me to develop my bishop, but now he's able to play pawn c5. So he guards both e5 and c5 with this knight on d7. So that was definitely not a bad defensive idea. My plan from here, though, is just to finish my development. So let's go knight d2. All my pieces are now developed and active. Rook to d1 is the next move. And this is the point. Like, I have every single piece in the game. I'm definitely going to be winning some material very soon. Thing is, it's hard for black to move his pieces. If he move the knight, he loses a pawn. Yes, he could move his b pawn, but it's very slow. And I'm planning on playing knight f3 and just immediately apply some pressure to his pawn. So b6 was played. Let's play knight f3. Now there's two pieces attacking e5. He only has one piece guarding e5. Rook to e1 would be a drawback mistake because he loses f7. So I'm assuming something like queen e7 or queen c7 here. Okay, bishop to b7 is not bad. Like he's like, okay, I'm gonna lose the pawn anyways. Let me just finish my development. Now let's think though. If I takes, knight takes, and then I takes, my rook is gonna be unprotected. So I have to ensure that I'm aware of that. My king is also not the safest. Takes, takes, but then the queen has no checks on my king. So it is in fact just a free pawn. So once he takes and I take, once the queen has no checks on the king, it's fine. There is this move queen to d2 that I completely missed, but luckily I'm still able to pull the rook back to e2, hit the queen, or just pull the queen back to b2 and try to trade the queens. Now we got back one of the pawns, so now it's just a matter of getting a few more pawns. One thing I noticed though is this bishop on a3. There's definitely ideas of sacking on c5, and then if he takes on c5, we take the bishop. But apart from that, I can't really tell what my bishop on a3 is doing. It was a good move to put it on a3, by the way, because it's very important that we connect to our rooks. But I need to get this bishop back in the game. So queen to g5 was played. Let's not get checkmated. And I think he's giving us the perfect opportunity to get the bishop back in the game, because now I'm able to go bishop c5 and hit the queen. I wasn't able to take because the queen is going to take with check. But once the queen moves now, I should be able to put my bishop somewhere and then just connect my rooks and I'm fine. Okay, so he decides to pull the queen back to g6. It's a good score for the queen. Let me just finish my development here. Bishop to f4. Bishop is unprotected whenever. Remember, if you have an unprotected piece, just pay more attention to it. It doesn't mean that you should never have unprotected pieces. You're not that good at chess. I'm not that good at chess. But if a piece is unprotected, pay attention to it. Ensure that you don't have an unprotected piece and an exposed king at the same time, or two unprotected pieces. Once you understand that you're not going to have those weaknesses, then you'll be fine. Okay, rook to e8 was played. The queen guards f7, so he was able to move the rook. But now I'm just gonna, instead of taking and allowing his rook to get the file, like look on it this way. If I take his rook, I'm actually, and this is important, I'm actually not trading my e rook for his e rook. I'm actually trading my e rook for his a rook, because if I take on e8, a rook is still gonna be on e8, and my rook is not gonna be on e2. So what I'm gonna do instead is play the move rook to e1. Now, if he takes, I take, and then I get the activity. Okay, so he did decide to take. Let's just take back here. Now, if you notice, look on the difference between the rooks now. Now, my rook is active. His rook is chilling over there, not doing anything. Bishop to c6 was played. Looks like a sign of him trying to eventually play b5. I like the idea of a rook to d7, though. I mean, rooks on this... Whoopsies, that does not work. Unless I'm trying to get checkmated, that would be a horrible drawback blunder. But okay, let's just play bishop to d5 here. Let's just trade here. I mean, I'm the one who's ahead by the piece. Let's just trade as many pieces off the board, especially since this bishop is so strong. Let's just play bishop d5. Okay, rook to d8 was played instead. So instead of taking, he decides to get his rook in the game. So that's not bad. I still have to be a bit careful. If I takes, there's queen takes. And it's kind of hard to get my queen in the game very easily. So I'm thinking of just playing pawn c4. And then if he takes, I take with the pawn, and then I have a pass pawn. So I'm actually going to take that route. I'm trying not to rush to win this. I'm not really seeing exactly what my dark squared bishop is doing, but it's an extra piece. So eventually it's going to join the game. Queen f queen f5, and this is why I warned you guys about unprotected pieces. Now luckily I have something, because okay, maybe I don't. Let's see. My bishop is unprotected. My pawn is under attack twice. First, I'm going to play the move queen e3. First, I'm going to protect my bishop. And protecting my bishop is offense is the best defense because he's actually not able to take because of the back rank I was threatening, which is why he played h6. Now that he plays h6, now I'm going to play pawn to d6. So now my pieces are coordinated together. And I also have this very strong pass pawn. I was expecting him to check. I mean, I could block it the queen, but then I'm going to lose this pawn. So let's just play king up here. Now he plays queen to f5, which means my bishop is pinned. And because my bishop is pinned, it means this pawn is under attack. With that being said, let's just play the move queen to f3, which means my bishop is now no longer pinned. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is, okay, he's attacking the bishop, let's just move it. Whenever the opponent is pinning one of your pieces, that exact moment, you notice that one of your pieces is pinned, deal with it immediately. Get out of that pin immediately. Now, there's going to be some cases where you're not able to get out of the pin immediately, but your plan has to be, how do I get out of this pin as quickly as possible? Okay, so he moves his queen. This is still guarded. I'm assuming f5 is a threat here. If I move my rook, he checks here. So let's play queen to e4. I'm just trying to trade the queens off the board, to be honest. If he takes, I take. Trade the queens and I'm fine. Guy doesn't want to trade. I was expecting something like that. All right, let's play king to g1. Aware of the fact that he has another check, but then if I block with the rook, I lose this pawn. Block with the rook, lose the pawn. Block with the rook, lose. Yeah, let's do that. Let's block with the rook and lose the pawn. I prefer to do that because now I could say his queen is out of the game, which is why he didn't take. Because if he had taken, I was going to play moves like queen e7 or bishop e5. So he decides to pull the queen back. But that should allow me to play queen to e7, though. And now I'm just forcing. Now I'm just forcing the queens off the board because I'm hitting both the queen and the rook, so he has to take. If he checks, I block with the bishop, and his queen and his rook is gonna be under attack. So he decided to take, and now we're just gonna take it the rook. We have a very strong pass pawn, so this should be game. And first, I'm actually gonna protect my pass pawn. So let's play bishop to c7, followed by bishop to maybe d8, and then the pass pawn is gonna be protected. And then from here, it's just a matter of just taking off all his pawns. So let's just guard the pawn. His rook is also trapped, by the way. So not only is my pass pawn protected, his rook is trapped. So he's improving his king. It's very important that I improve my king as well. And then he starts to roll the pawns. Let's just keep getting the king in the game, and my king is just going to take care of everything. My king may also be the piece to win his rook. So let's continue to get the king in the game. Okay, he's trying to guard his pawns. Let's get the king in the game. Yep. Hopefully, you guys are now able to see how important king activity is. My king is going to be the piece that helps me to win this. Okay, so he moves the king. Now we take, and he's now going to lose his rook. Because if he moves the rook, which he did, I simply queen my pawn. And then once the rook takes, I just take back. And now it's GG's. Okay, he moves the king. Now it's just a matter of taking all the pawns, and the opponent resigns. But more Scotch Gambit against 1,800 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,800. So pawn e5, let's go knight to f3, hit the pawn, knight c6, we play d4. And once they take the pawn, they're in the Scotch game. Like, this is already the Scotch game, but taking the pawn is the Scotch Gambit. Or, well, once they take the pawn, it's confirmed. So he did take the pawn. Now, if you take, it's the Scotch game. If you play bishop c4, it's the Scotch Gambit. The Scotch Gambit is way more aggressive than the Scotch game. They're both good openings, though. Okay, pawn to d6. This is the solid approach. Let's just play pawn c3. You guys should know how this works by now. Once they play d6, we voluntarily go to the pawn sacrifice, just knowing that we have this lead in development, and it's going to be very easy for us to start some very quick attack on their king. Okay, knight f6 is a very good move. Very, very good move because he decides to attack e4 and didn't take, so my knight isn't guarding e4. I'm thinking of just castling though, and then if he takes, we play rook e1, but then he has d5. Okay, let's say if I takes and then he plays takes, I should be able to play some e5, knight move, because I'm trying to say, okay, you're going to have an unprotected knight on e5. I mean, there's also knight takes. Let's just castle. I'm just going to castle. If he plays knight takes, I should be able to play knight takes, pawn takes, rook e1. You know, he shouldn't be grabbing pawns with his king in the center of the board. And again, knight g5 shouldn't work due to knight e5. Okay, now he decides to take on c3. So everything eventually works out because now I takes. This is now guarded. Bishop to g5 I've faced. If bishop to g4, queen b3. If bishop e6, we take. Bishop to e7 is definitely the way to play against this because now his king is gonna get castled, and I'm not seeing any ways in which I could prevent him from castling. I'm not gonna sack. If knight g5, there's knight e5. He's still able to get castled. So I'm just gonna play it very patiently, as if I'm playing the Smith Morra Gambit. So that's what I'm gonna do. So let's first play h3, so that way there's no bishop g4 pinning the knight. And then from here, I'm not sure if you guys watched the video on the Smith Morra Gambit that I just posted, but it's kind of like how I like to develop against the Sicilian defense. So, okay, first it's very important that I finish my development. So let's go bishop e3, and then I could go queen e2, rook d1, rook c1, or queen d2, rook d1, rook c1. I'm thinking of queen d2 because there could be some sacrificial ideas on h6 as well. Yeah, bishop e6 it's the most natural looking move. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. There just wasn't good squares for his bishop, as you could see. But once they play bishop e6, we always take on e6 because there's two reasons. B7 becomes unprotected and e6 becomes unprotected. The fact that the king is on the same line as e6 should be a plus. Queen b3, okay, there is queen to c8, and if immediate queen b3, there's also queen d7. And if you take rook b8, queen a6, rook b2. So let's not immediately target the b7 pawn. The goal is actually to target the e6 pawn. So let's go knight g5. We're already threatening a fork. I'm expecting queen d7, and then I'm going to play queen to b3 to target e6 and b7. But the goal is actually to target e6. And then pawn d5, I take. Pawn takes. Okay, I think he needs to play queen to d7 followed by pawn d5, and he's safe. But let's see. Okay, so he did play queen to d7. Now let's just continue to apply some more pressure to his position. We have two attackers on e6, one attacker on b7. He needs to play pawn to d5, and this does not mean I'm going to win back the pawn. Like, b7 was already poisoned. I don't think he needed to try to guard b7, because if I take on b7, there's rook over. Pulling the knight back to d8 is a bit more passive, and it's kind of what I want. Like, I want him to be playing like this. I want him to be pulling his pieces back. So now I'm going to play the move rook to d8. Well, rook to d1, just putting my rook on the same line as the queen, which means moves like pawn to e5 now becomes a threat. Pawn to h6, I kind of have to go back. I mean, pawn h6, pawn e5 is the next best thing I could try. But he takes my knight, I take his knight, then he takes my pawn. We're just trading, and I don't necessarily want to be trading. And I am still down by a pawn, so we still have to keep that in mind. So h6 was played. We have to pull the knight back. And now there's two threats. I want to play e5, hit the knight. He's not able to take. There's also knight e5 hits the queen. But I mean, honestly, just a simple rook c1, bringing the last piece in the game. Guys, and please remember this. If you're playing down by the pawn, don't be like, oh, I need to win back my pawn. What should I do to win back the pawn? No, you have a better position, bro. Just keep improving your position. So pawn c6 was played. Immediately, I'm thinking about pawn e5 hits the knight, but he's going to play knight e5. That's why he played c6. Like, this knight is definitely not doing anything. There's knight e5. There's queen back to e8, so I'm not going to be able to play knight g6. So let's see. Pawn e5, knight d5, takes, bishop takes, knight e4 hits the bishop. But then he has a very strong knight. And I think he wants to play pawn to d5 as well. Pawn d5, if I takes, he takes. And I mean, that's just not bad. Okay, pawn d5. If pawn d5, I play pawn e5. So instead of playing rook c1, I'm going to play rook d2 because I think my rooks are more active along the d file than putting a rook on the c file. So rook d2, the idea is just to get all my pieces active. And again, like, the position is definitely harder for black to play here. So knight f7 was played. So he basically wanted to get his knight in the game, but he wanted to defend b7 first. Okay. Knight e5 doesn't work because of knight takes, pawn e5. There is still knight to d5. With that being said, let's just double up the rooks along the same line as the queen. If he plays d5, then I play e5. Otherwise, I don't think I want to play e5 and then allow knight d5. But let's see. Eventually I may have to do it because his pawn on e6 is going to be weak. But it's best if I just keep focusing on improving my position while he just plays a harder game. And, because it's harder for him to play, naturally, he's going to be using more time. Okay, so we did see pawn to d5 on the board. We're not going to take. The agreement was to play e5. whenever he plays d5 and then forces knight to a very weird looking square. It's a very solid position for him, though, I'm not going to lie, because there's no immediate real looking weaknesses. So I just have to continue to improve my position. Knight h7 is the move I'm expecting. If knight h7, I'm actually thinking of playing knight e4 because for one, I could transfer my knight to the king side, which it definitely better on the king side because it's not doing anything on the queen side. And two, I could play knight c5 if I want. And if you're saying why can't he take, it's because the pawn is just pinned to the queen. So he pulls the knight back. Now we play knight e4, and that's the idea. And I want you guys to notice how easy the position is for me to play. That's another takeaway. When you play these gambits, it's not to be like, okay, let me sack my pawn and then immediately win the game. There's going to be a ton of time where you win, like you've been watching this video. But I think it's best to just play an easy game, let them play a hard game. So knight to g5 was played. Takes knight takes bishop takes pawn takes, and his pawn structure is already just bad. So I think I'm definitely gonna go in all of that. So basically, what I just said just now is just taking everything. So knight takes. Um, do I have anything better? The knight is heading towards e4. So, okay, do I take with the knight or the bishop? Because what if I take with the knight and he takes with the pawn? Yeah, I don't care. Let's just take. And then after bishop takes, do I have f4? No, because he's going to be able to take. So let's just take. And then all of a sudden, yes, we're down by a pawn, but now we have a target. What's the target? His weak pawn on g3. So what do we do here? We start attacking the weak pawn. Queen to g3, attacking the unprotected pawn. Keep in mind, I'm also protecting my pawn. There is this rook f5 move, which is very strong. Queen to e7 guarded the pawn. I think he needed to play rook f5 so that way he could try to target this pawn some more. But let's play rook to d4 with the plan of playing rook to g4. And rook to f5 is not going to be a hard move for him to find. He did play rook to f5. Let's still play rook to g4 because the plan is to target the pawn. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to win the pawn, but we have to target the pawn. And now I'm expecting him to play rook to f8. Rook to f8 targets f2. He didn't. Pawn c5 is also a good move. Okay, now I'm going to play rook f3, there's rook f8. I want to play rook d3 to f3. That's what I want to do. But I'm not seeing it working. Pawn to b4 doesn't work. Pawn to h4, he's just going to take. All right, pawn to h4 is against the whole idea. h4 takes, but I'm going to do it. It's against the whole idea though. h4 takes, there's rook takes. Yeah, let's play h4. The reason why I say h4 is against the whole idea is because the goal is to target his pawn on g5, but I have two attackers. He has two defenders. I'm just not seeing any way to add more attackers, to be honest. So once he takes, I play rook takes, and then at least I'm going to be able to play queen h3 and just threaten some checkmating ideas along this file. Again, easy position for me to play, hard position for him to play, but he's still ahead by a pawn at the end of the day. So I can't just go around and just trade all the pieces off the board. For example, there's a rook sack here. But I'm just gonna take because if he takes my rook, I take on e6 with check hand. I'm gonna win the pawn on d5. He's playing very well, by the way, but eventually he's gonna be playing badly because of his time, unfortunately. But I mean, time is also a factor, and I want you guys to notice how the moves for me is very easy to find. Like literally, I'm just gonna play queen h3 with the ideas of playing rook to h8 next, and he needs to find very creative ways to prevent this threat. So, for example, now I play, yes, his last move is targeting f7. I'm still going to play queen h3 because if he takes on f7 and I check, king up, then I'm winning this. Now, there is also a rook takes e5, which, oh, I should have played queen h2. Yeah, that was the plan. Queen h2, threaten h8, keeping the pawn guarded. I just made a mistake, guys. Like, if you're down by 2 pawns and you don't have any attack, then, you're in trouble. But if rook takes, I check, king up, maybe I take. Hmm. It's gonna be hard now. But what I'm gonna do if he takes, I'm not gonna make it obvious. So I'm not gonna immediately check. Okay, he didn't take it. He plays queen g5, which is also strong. If I check, there's king up. So what if I play rook to d3, still allowing him to take, so that way I'm able to play rook to g3. Pawn to f4 doesn't guard. Okay, it's a dead pawn. If I play f4, well, if f4 rook takes, I could take on e6. That's interesting. And then once I take on e6, he has to block with the rook. And then this is going to be under attack. Okay, maybe I could just take and then that's actually interesting. I was about to say it's a dead pawn. I mean, rook to d3 is also strong, but I like f4. F4 is just a nice move. Tactically, F4 is nice because if he takes, it leaves E6 unprotected. And once he loses E6, D5 will fall. So I like F4. F4 is probably not a brilliant move, but maybe it's a great move because and he still has to worry about the rook going to H8. And remember, guys, this thing that I see a lot, the threat is better than the execution because he's now calculating, okay, he plays F4. What if king to J6? He didn't even take it. So he pulls the queen back, check king up, takes, king takes. That doesn't work. If rook to G3, now he's able to take because the queen guards the pawn. So rook to D, okay, yeah, rook to D3, he takes, rook to G3, hits the queen, and then we go for the attack. I think I'm going to go for this. Rook to D3, he takes, rook to G3, maybe he has a check here. After king up, he has no more checks, and he has to be careful where he puts his queen, and then I'm going to check, my queen is going to come in. So yeah, I like this move, rook to D3. And again, it's easier for me to play. Like if I wasn't like voicing my thoughts, I would have had way more time in this position. So yeah, this is Gabe. So he took. Okay, do we check first? Or because immediate rook to G3, what if he takes? Or maybe check, king up, then rook over. No, that doesn't work. Immediate rook G3, takes, takes. Okay, let's just play immediate rook G3. I think he needs to take on h4. Like once he takes on h4, we play queen takes h4. If he takes on h4, I can't take his queen because he takes my queen. And if I trade the queen, I'm going to be losing because he's ahead by 2 pawns. So after takes, takes, then I was expecting this though. I'm not going to lie. Now I play king up and then he plays rook to f1. And okay, one of us is going to be getting checkmated here. It's just who gets the tempo first. If he plays rook f1, rook h1 is going to be mate. But the fact that I check his king first, there has to be a way for me to checkmate that king. So he decides to put the queen back on f5, which makes sense. So now if I check, okay, isn't this over though? Check, king up, takes, king takes, queen check. And then once the king move, I check on g7, and then he has to block with the queen. I take the queen and I win the game. So all it takes is the slightest mistake, and it's game over. So the king move, we take on f8, the king has to take, and then, as we said, we check on h8. The king now has to move. And then, once the king, well, that makes it easier because that's just a checkmate. But more Scotch Gambit against 1900 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Let's play some aggressive Scotch Gambit. E5, we develop the knight, hit the pawn, guards the pawn, we play d4. And then once they take, we go bishop to c4. If knight f6, we play e5. Any other move they play, we play c3. So pawn d6, let's just play c3. And the whole idea is once he takes, I take, I'm going to have this massive lead in development. I have seen that playing a move like knight to f6 in these types of scenarios is actually good for black. But usually once they do that, I just castle my king and then be like, hey, if you want to move the same pieces more than once in the opening, that's on you. What have we learned about this bishop g4 move? Let me see if you guys are learning. We've learned that the moment the bishop moves to g4, b7 is unprotected. And because we're already applying pressure to f7, we play queen to b3, which attacks f7 and apply pressure to b7. Queen to d7, there's a lot of cases where we're able, yeah. So for example here, let's calculate here. So if I take the free pawn, rook to b8, and I have to move my queen, and it's kind of weird. But if we take on f7 first with check, force the queen away, then we take on b7 because the rook is unprotected. And once he moves the rook, that's when we take on c6 with check hand. At that point, we're basically winning back our pawn. Like his king is in check, he's able to block with the bishop. We're just going to be able to move our queen though to, let's say, a6, and everything is fine. So this is also a very important tactic. Instead of taking on b7, allowing rook to b8, and you have to play queen a6, I like taking on f7 first with check, forcing the queen away. So that way, once you take on b7, you're going to be able to take on c6. Okay, queen takes f7 was played. Now let's take on b7, hit the rook, hit the unprotected knight. Rook b8, I'm assuming, take the knight, and okay, we're just chilling here. So after this rook to b8 move, we take the knight with check. Funny enough, I'm the one who is ahead by a pawn. And then he plays king to d8. Like, he's basically saying, okay, I'm down by a pawn, but now you're the one who's defending, which is okay because knight takes d4 means I'm ahead by 2 pawns, but I'm thinking about playing bishop to g5 check first. If he blocks with the bishop, I trade and I get nothing at all from that. So I'm trying to castle. If I castle, he's going to take my knight. So I'm going to take on d4 first. Let's take on d4. Now we could brag about the fact that we're ahead by 2 pawns. And then we could also brag about the fact that our king is safe and his king is not going to be safe. Bishop back to d7 was played. Okay, my queen is under attack. I have to move the queen. There's queen to a6 here, which is very strong because, like, if you have to move a piece away, move it to somewhere where you attack something. That way you keep the initiative. So now he has options like, do I protect the pawn? Do I go down by 3 pawns? Lose type of situation. Okay, so he moves his rook over to c8. I mean, I'm not really gonna take on a7. No, that's being too greedy. I mean, it's a dead pawn. There's no way to guard it. So let me just get my king out the center of the board. And I'm also gonna finish the development as well. So put this knight somewhere, put this bishop somewhere. We're in no rush to win this. Pawn c5 hits the knight. Okay. Where do we put the knight? Let's put the knight on f5, targeting the pawn on d6. I want you guys to notice how I'm also allowing him to take on f5 twice because I'm only guarding it once. But for one, his bishop is one of his developed piece, so I don't mind if he do that. Two, I can always take the pawn on a7 after. So he took, let's take, and assuming he's gonna play queen takes, and we can always just take on a7. So I'm still gonna be ahead by 2 pawns in this position. I just need to finish my development. So I'm probably going to play knight to a3 to b4 or knight a3 to c4. There's also knight d2 to f3. What I'm going to do with this bishop, not 100% sure. Okay, how do we do this? I'm not sure where to put the knight, but let's go knight d2, heading towards c4 and f3. And my bishop is also going to be able to get to g5 once my knight is on f3. And then once my rook gets d8 and e8, then, okay, should be game. Rook to f7. Wasn't expecting that, but my queen is under attack. If I play queen b6 to pin the knight, there's knight e5. Okay, let's check the king. So that way we get the tempo. If he blocks with the queen, I trade, I don't care. He moves the king, we keep the tempo. There's a check here that I don't need to play. I don't get anything from that check anyway. So let's just move the knight so I'm able to develop my bishop. This bishop is also pinned, so he's not going to be able to develop his rook. So I'm still chilling here. Bishop e3 or bishop g5. I'm leaning towards bishop g5 because I'm just trying to trade. I'm the one who is ahead in material. So he plays pawn to h5. Not sure why. Let's continue with the plan. Bishop to g5. There's also some rook e1, take on f6, queen e8, which could also lead to some checkmate. So let's see. Knight back to h7 was played. Okay. Now, there's definitely queen to d8 check, but after king to c6, I'm not seeing what I get. My bishop is under attack, so there's also bishop to d8, which hits the rook. And the rook only has one square, but then I'm able to check here and then take the rook. So bishop to d8 instead of queen. No. Oh my God, no. Rook to c8. And I just blundered. I just blundered an entire piece. Oh my lord. There's just rook to c8 here. What do I have if the rook goes to c8? Oh my god, I blundered. Okay, oh, I blundered. Ugh. Okay, let's check on b5. And then once the king takes, we go rook to e1. So everything that I just said about bishop to d8 was wrong. Queen to d8 was better. But let's play rook to e1 and threaten some attacks here. Now, I don't think white is losing here, but I think the position is kind of equal because I have the attack. He has the extra piece, which is why he's now going for the queen trades. But I can't trade anymore. I just can't. All right, let's give a check here. Maybe he's going to block with the queen. I can't trade though. So if he blocks with the queen, I have to pull back, which is crazy. Yeah, let's just pull back. And then I'm going to have to get my rook in the game very, very quickly. So I'm going to have to do all of this without my bishop. Maybe I'm just going to push this pass pawn up the board and just use it to win one of his pieces. Yeah, that's definitely a plan. Okay, pawn g5. All of a sudden, the guy is now playing super aggressive. Let's play rook to d1. Let's put the rook on the same line as the king. So if pawn g4, I'm able to play knight e5, and he's not going to be able to take due to the pin, and I'm threatening some forks. Wow. So he did play pawn g4. We're still going to be playing knight e5. He's not able to take. I'm threatening a fork. Again, I'm sure white is better here, but before I had such a big advantage. Knight to g5 was played. Very nice move, by the way, because he's defending f7. And I'm trying to find some fancy ways of chasing away that knight. For example, pawn h4 hits the knight, he en passant, then pawn f4 hits the knight again. I don't think I have to do all of that though. That's the thing. Like I think it works, but I don't think I have to do all of that. Like I'm thinking of queen to d5, bishop to g7. Okay, there's also knight g6 here. Knight g6 hits the rook. Okay, queen to I think it's queen to d5 first. Just queen to d5 centralizes the queen. And I want to play knight g6. The reason why I played queen to d5, by the way, is I'm putting my queen on the same line as the knight. Now that he plays bishop e7, he should be losing again because now I'm able to play knight g6, which forks his rook and his bishop. And the bishop is one of the main defenders of the knight. So if I'm able to take out this bishop, then I'm going to be able to win the knight. We win back the knight, which means we're winning the game. Wow. Okay, so rook to e8 was played. Let's just eliminate this bishop, which means the knight is unprotected. Maybe he needs to just throw in a check with the knight and said, okay, at least I double up your pawns, but he didn't. So let's just take the knight. And now we're still ahead by 2 pawns here. His king is not safe. Like we can do all the trades, take on e7, take on e6. And here's a very nice way that I'm going to use to win a pawn. So first I'm going to take with the rook. And then once the queen takes, I'm going to take with the rook again. Queen is not going to be able to take due to the pin. So he has to move the king. And then once I take the queen, the rook ending is winning. Now that's one way to win. I'm trying to see if there's other ways, but I'm not seeing it. Plus, I'm ahead by 2 pawns. It's just simplification. We want to trade. So the queen is pinned. Pin pieces doesn't protect. Take on d6 with check. The queen is not able to take, so the king has to move, and then we trade. Wait, do we have to trade the queens though? No, we're definitely not trading the queens. I see a way to win the queen here. Check. If king up, I check, and then once the no, that doesn't make any sense. Check. There's no king up, so check. He has to block with the queen. Blocks with the queen. I check him again, and okay, but then he goes here though. Like there's something here. There has to be something here. Check on g6. Blocks with the queen, I check. King over, then I pin. Check on g6. King over, I check. King over, then I pin. Very good. So check on g6 is the correct move. So if he blocks with the queen, I check. If he moves the king, I check. So he did block with the queen. Now we check on e6, if trying to force his king away. But then once the king goes to f8, now we play rook to f6, pinning the queen, and he resigns. More Scotch Gambit against 2000 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 2000. We're finishing off with a bang. E5, let's hit the pawn. He guards it onto d4. The Scotch game? No, the Scotch Gambit. Okay, 2000 level players should know how to react to this. Knight f6, pawn e5, pawn d5. And again, if you're going to try out the Scotch Gambit, this is the line to know. Knight f6, pawn e5, pawn d5. Okay, so knight f6 was played. Once they go knight f6, we play e5, and we immediately hit the opponent's knight. And then once they play pawn to d5 to hit the bishop, we put the bishop on b5, pinning the knight to the king. Now, the main theoretical move is knight to e4, and then we're just going to be taking on d4. And, you guys could just have a look on how to play if they play the correct response to the Scotch Gambit. So that's what you guys are about to see. So knight e4. Let's take on d4. Now we have 2 pieces applying pressure to his knight, and he's only guarding it once. So bishop d7 has to be played. And in this particular position, in this particular theoretical opening, it is best to give up the bishop for the knight, because if you take with the knight, he takes with the pawn. Now we have to move the bishop again. So let's give up the bishop for the knight. And usually in this position, they take, and I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. So bishop takes is actually bad. That's not the move, bro. Because for one, eventually I'm gonna be able to take on c6. Two, I mean, if someone give up their bishop for the knight, just take the bishop. Like, even if I choose to take the bishop now, you're gonna get double pawns anyway. So I'm just gonna castle. I'm not even gonna rush to take it. Now, the thing is though, he doesn't have to give it to me. So he could pull the bishop back. But if he does that, taking on c6, pulling the bishop back to d7, that's wasting time. That's all the time I need. And the plan is to start rolling these pawns up the board. So bishop to c5 was played. That's one of the very good ways to react to this. And now I'm going to play pawn to f3. And this is important. This is a very important idea for you guys to know. First, play f3 to hit the knight. And the only score for the knight is g5, and then you play f4 to hit the knight again. Now, you're actually not wasting time because the initial idea was to get the pawn on f4. Think about it like this. In this exact scenario, while his bishop is on c5, we could have just played f4 in one move, and it would be his turn to play. But if we play f3, once the knight move, we play f4, the knight goes back to e4, where we would have been in the same scenario with our turn to play. But he decides to play knight e6, PP on the PP, so that's not bad. I'm thinking of bishop e3, developing my bishop guarding the knight, but let's just play c3. Let's just ensure that we're not losing anything. If he decides to take, we take it the bishop, and once we start rolling these kingside pawns up the board, he's going to be getting checkmated if he decides to castle on the king side. So this is like how to play against if they know what to do, but he didn't really know what to do because he decided to take with the bishop here. So if you see them take with the bishop, do like this. If you see them take with the pawn, then we're still gonna castle, we're still gonna play f3, f4, and so on. But he's just given me a better version, basically. Okay, queen to e7 was played, and it's no surprise that he's gonna castle on the queen side, because if he castle on the king side, it's over. Okay, now I want to play f5 though. f5 is nice because f5 hits the knight, and if he takes, I take it the bishop, and my pawns are just pretty. To be honest, that's how I could describe it. Now, if f5, however, and then he decides to play knight g5, pawn f6 should be winning a piece. Like there's no other moves that I'm seeing. So I mean, he just has to take. Just thought I was about to blunder, like knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, but luckily I'm able to take the actual bishop and I'm fine. Not able to take the queen due to the pin, but taking the bishop is fine. I think white has a winning advantage. Wouldn't say white is winning, but white has a winning advantage. So he took, we take it the bishop. I'm expecting bishop back to b6. Guy's gonna castle. He's definitely gonna castle. So queen g4 I'm thinking of. Queen g4 keeps the pawn guarded. Nope, there is queen takes e5, which is a very nice threat that I almost fell for. So why not just play king h1? King h1. Yeah, let's go king h1. Let's go king h1 and then knight c3 because he was threatening to play queen takes e5. Now, even though my pawn structure is so pretty, my pawn on d4 is in fact a weakness. Like it can't be guarded by another pawn. It's pretty though. Now, it's opposite side castle, so it should be a crazy game. Weirdly enough, very weirdly enough, I'm behind in development. I don't know how it happened, but I am behind in development. I got a very nice pawn structure for it though. So from here, the goal is just to try to develop as quickly as I possibly can. I'm seeing b3, bishop a3, but I would love to be rolling my pawn. So I'm also seeing a4, a5 ideas. If a4, there's a5, b4, there's queen takes. All right, the plan is to play a4, a5, but let's not think about moving the pawns before moving the pieces because a lot of you guys are always asking, hey sir, when do we start the pawn storm? It's simple. Once all your pieces are on good squares, then start thinking about moving the pawns. Okay, pawn to g6 was played. It's a valid move. I mean, we're definitely not going to take because if I take, he takes with the rook, and okay, maybe I'll just resign at that point. Now I need to think. Maybe queen to g4 no. If he takes, I take with check. If the bishop block hits my queen, there's a tactic with knight takes d5, hit his queen. So that's a nice idea. That point, there's probably queen h4. I get rid of this bishop with check, and then we try to get the queens off the board. Now, queen to g4 also threatens bishop to g5 because the queen and the rook is on the same line. I could have played f6 and just hit the queen, but it's best to keep the position flexible. Downside of this though is I'm gonna be opening this file. So he saw everything and he did that wasn't everything. He saw that my queen was on the same line as the king, and he thought I was threatening to play f6 to win the queen, even though he could have moved the queen. What he didn't see is the fact that I was actually threatening bishop to g5, hitting the queen and the rook. This is called a skewer, by the way, where you force the more valuable piece out the way, then take the less valuable piece. Taking on f5 does not work because if he takes on f5 to counterattack my queen, I just take his queen. And if he takes my queen, I take his rook. And then after he takes my bishop, okay, maybe not though, maybe not because I don't want to lose my d pawn. I think it's winning. Take queen, take rook. Take queen, take queen, take rook. Take bishop. Take pawn, or take pawn, Queen is still under attack. Force the queen to move, then take rook. Like, I'm trying to find a way to do this and still trade the queens at the same time. Take queen, take queen, take queen, take bishop, then play rook to d1, and then the f pawn is hanging. But it's just easy to protect the f pawn. So we're not doing that. Let's go rook takes. I'd love to trade the queens, to be honest. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if he plays rook. Oh no, I just made a mistake. I just made a mistake. I should have played queen takes. He's actually able to play rook d to g8 and pin my bishop, which he missed. Because if he had pinned my bishop and I take his queen, he takes my queen, but he moves the queen instead. So we're just going to be taking the queen. And, he's going to take back. And from here, I'm just ahead by an exchange. So rook takes. This is now the only piece that is not doing anything. So let's just get the last piece in the game with rook to f1. We're also attacking his pawn on f7 twice. My pawn on d4 is my weakest pawn. There's no way for him to guard this. Oh, thought I blundered again. I missed bishop d7. Luckily, my rook is a defender. So what I'm gonna do, like if I play queen f4, he takes. So I have to get out of the pin. Remember when I tell you guys that if you're inside of a pin, you get out immediately? I'm going to get out of the pin immediately by playing the move queen to h4 and hit the unprotected rook. So there's also no ideas of him thinking about giving up the queen for the two rooks. He has to save his rook first. And then once he saved the rook, I may take the pawn, I may play rook to f6 and attack his queen first. It all depends on where he puts the rook or how he defend his rook. Okay, rook to f8. Definitely gonna just take because the rook is still overworked anyways. Like, oh, why am I almost blundering? If I takes rook takes check, he's actually able to block with the bishop. That would be a horrible blunder. So let's just play rook to f6 hits the queen. If the queen goes too far, he loses this pawn. This pawn is also hanging. So this is just GG's anyways. Okay, queen to g4. This is him giving up, by the way, because why are you trying to just get the queens off the board like that? Bishop takes. Okay, how do I do this? Takes, rook takes, bishop takes, and then just roll, or do I takes, bishop takes? I don't want to trade pawns. You guys should know me. We don't trade pawns in the end games. We win them instead. So rook to f4, hit the bishop, guard the pawn. Then once he puts the bishop on e6, which I knew he would have done, which is a blunder because both of my rooks are on the same line as his rook, which means the pawn on f7 is pinned, and pinned pieces does not protect. Rook takes e6 is a free bishop. And then he took on d4 because now if I takes, then he's going to be able to take my rook. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to move my rook to this e7, and I'm not just ahead by an entire rook. If he moves the bishop, I take on f7, c7 is falling, d5 is falling. Okay, he pulls the bishop back. If I, well, he resigns.